From the beautiful city of Los Angeles, California, we bring you the Gimme Three podcast. Hello and welcome, cinephiles, cinema lovers, movie appreciators, friends, and family, to the Gimme Three podcast, a series for cinephiles. The show where we pick three films based on one theme. I'm your host, Nicholas Ybarra. Sad to report that our esteemed co-host, Bella Efstratis, has the week off, but she is making big moves. She is, in fact, moving this weekend, so she needed some time away to get her new place situated and whatnot. But I'm very happy to report that this week I am joined by the one, the only, Gimme Three producer, PGA producer, and my wife, 1 Minute Mereu herself, Sonja Mereu.
I guess it's not so bad to have that nickname if you're a woman, but I wouldn't go around calling me that too much.
What is going on, Sonja? Not
much. I'm excited to talk for a couple more than 1 minute today. And yeah, I'm just pleased to be on the show.
Yes, I appreciate you stepping up. And this theme was picked by you. And happy to have you on this special episode. And we are going to be celebrating the life and the work of a damn fine actor, Donald Sutherland. And I just want to also, we're honoring Donald Sutherland. I also want to give a shout out to Bill Cobbs, who we also lost in the last few days here. So we didn't have time to prep an episode for him, but another great character actor that we lost recently. Two greats gone on to greener pastures. But today we are exploring the incredible work of Donald Sutherland's career. And before we get into the films, Sonja, I was curious. Do you remember either your first Sutherland movie, or B, if you don't remember your first Sutherland movie, what's the movie for you personally? Not what the grand world thinks of when they think of Sutherland. When you think of Donald Sutherland, what movie do you cling to?
Well, you know what? I'm going to answer both those questions. Actually, my
extra credit
answer, the movie that I will always associate with him first is Don't Look Now, which I had been wanting to rewatch for a long time. And spoiler alert, we get to talk about it today. Mm-hmm. Yes, that's what I'll always think of him first, because that movie stayed with me like in a deep, dark place since I saw it in high school. But the first movie that I saw with him, probably Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Right.
I mean, I don't think I knew who he was, and obviously he's not the star of the movie, or the one that a 10-year-old girl would be the most interested in.
Right. You're like, get this old guy out of there. Give me some more Luke Perry.
But I did remember the character and even his name. So that says something about Donald for sure. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But yeah, I'm sorry, he's no Luke Perry. Yeah. And then I actually realized that he is a voice on one of my favorite episode of The Simpsons.
Which episode is that?
It's Lisa the Iconoclast, which is season 7, episode 16. He plays the guy who's the Jebediah Springfield expert, who Lisa exposes that Jebediah Springfield was really like a pirate with a silver tongue who fought George Washington.
Right. That's a great episode.
Yeah. Super great classic episode. Season 7 might be the best episode of The Simpsons. They were just firing on all the cylinders and definitely turned up to 11 on that season. Yeah. So when I was reading about his life and his career, I came across that and I was like, oh, that's really cool. I love that character.
That's awesome. That's great. Yeah, I think like you, I kind of, growing up in the 90s, I think I was privy to his later career work. I didn't see Don't Look Now until last week. So I was introduced to Mr. Sutherland as a great supporting character because he was doing a lot of supporting roles in the 90s, not the leading man, so A Time to Kill, Fallen, Instinct. Those were like my introductions to Donald Sutherland. You ever seen Instinct?
I don't think so.
It's got Cuba Gooding Jr. and Anthony Hopkins. I haven't seen it in years. I wonder if that holds up, but I used to love that movie.
I've definitely seen Fallen, but now I don't remember who he plays in Fallen.
In a lot of these movies,
cop or something.
Yeah, he was like the captain or like the guy behind the desk. He was either like the doctor who's like training the psychiatrists, or he's like the captain in the police force who's like, God damn it, do what I tell you. He like got kind of typecast as like the magician, the magician character, and that's who he is also in Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Right. Yeah.
So we're gonna get into Mr. Sutherland's work, three of his more famous pieces. But before we do, I want to give a little bit of a background on the incredible Donald Sutherland, which I learned a lot doing some research on this guy. Despite starting his career in all of these American war movies, this dude's Canadian.
No.
I didn't know that.
I feel like everyone who's really good is not American when you trace back their origins. Sorry, Americans.
Wow.
Sorry, John C. Reilly. I know you're American. I love you.
On the week of 4th of July. No, jeez, I'm crow. So yeah, he was born in St. John, New Brunswick, Canada in 1935. Rose to fame, as I mentioned, with 3 prominent war films: The Dirty Dozen, which came out in 1967, MASH, and Kelly's Heroes. Both of those came out in 1970. And from there, he went on to an incredible run of films as a leading and supporting actor, including Clute, Don't Look Now, which we'll talk about later, Animal House, Invasion of the Body Snatchers, Ordinary People, JFK, Pride and Prejudice, and of course, most recently, the Hunger Games franchise, which I have seen none of those Hunger Games movies, so I can't speak to those too much.
I think he's a bad guy in it.
Good.
I think he's like the president or something. I only saw the first one.
Cool.
But
1995, he won an Emmy Award for Outstanding Supporting Actor in a Limited Series or Movie for Citizen X, which he's incredible in. I haven't seen that in a couple decades also, but good movie. Great. Donald's great in it. The man never won an Academy Award, but he was given the honorary Academy Award in 2017. They recognized the error of their ways, as they often do too late. And of course, I think it's worth mentioning that the acting bug caught on in the family because, obviously his son, Kiefer Sutherland, had a great career in television and film as well. And something that I learned, Sonja, right now we are in the middle of watching the show Veep, which we thought would be a fun thing to watch during an election year. It's turning out to be both hilarious and depressing. Show's excellent, but Sarah Sutherland, who plays Catherine, Selena Meyer's daughter in that show, that is Kiefer's daughter, Donald's granddaughter. Didn't know that. That was a learn something new every day moment.
That's cool. She's so funny. She's like one of those characters that I feel like they weren't going to give her such a big role initially on the show. And they just were like, wait, we have to keep like writing more stuff for her because she's so funny.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I agree. She is got a subtle way about her that just like always works in that show. And so that was very cool to see. Sonja, any thoughts on Sutherland career and life as a whole before we dive into these 3 films?
Yeah, no. I mean, I think we can cover it during the film discussion. But I did pull what Kiefer Sutherland posted on social media after he died. So I thought it was really nice and worth reading. Mm-hmm. So if you don't mind, I will read that.
Please.
So yeah, this is from his son, Kiefer Sutherland. Great actor in his own right. Love flatliners. He wrote, I personally think he is one of the most important actors in the history of film. Never daunted by a role, good, bad, or ugly. He loved what he did, and he did what he loved. And one can never ask for more than that. A life well lived.
Hear, hear. That's beautifully written, Kiefer. Beautifully written, and I agree wholeheartedly. I think he is a very important actor in the history of film, as we're going to explore as we talk about these three films. Which we are going to start with the film that haunted Sonja for 25 years. Don't Look Now is the name of the film. 1973, directed by Nicholas Roeg.
I think it's Rogue.
Nicholas Roeg. Based on the short story by Daphne du Maurier, who she wrote about the film after she saw it. This film added more depth to the unconscious thoughts that might have been my own. So she was a very big fan of this film, which is not always the case when you're talking about the source material writer. So Don't Look Now, we got a very handsome Donald Sutherland with an excellent mustache. We've got a very gorgeous Julie Christie with a hell of a fine hairdo herself in this movie. And the film opens with John Baxter, who's Donald Sutherland, and his wife, Laura, who is Julie Christie. They're chilling at home. They're doing some work. It looks like one of those, lovely, lazy Saturdays or something. And then the unthinkable, the most nightmarish scenario happens, and that is their daughter falls into a pond or a lake or something, some body of water, and drowns. We pick back up with the parents some period of time later. It's a little unclear, but the parents are now grief-stricken. They're in Venice, Italy. And Baxter is there working as an architect on a new massive church, while Laura, his wife, is working on herself, finding new ways to deal with the death of their daughter, which includes meeting and seeing a psychic who, despite being blind, has third sight. And this blind woman tells the Baxters they need to GTFO. They need to get out of Venice, because if they stay, bad things are going to happen. And the psychic claims that this is a posthumous message from their daughter, loaded with creepy camera work, Hitchcockian storytelling, tense world building, shots of Venice that would just make you go, ew. Like, you've never seen Venice shot like this. It is absolutely disgusting. And 2 banger performances by Sutherland and Julie Christie. Sonja, your thoughts on Don't Look Now and the film that haunted your dreams for 25 years.
When you said 2 banger performances, it immediately made me think about the sex scene in this movie, which is admittedly not my takeaway from the film, by the way. Yeah. But there is a pretty epic and pretty awesome sex scene between these 2 bangers of a performance.
Yes, absolutely.
And when I was watching it the other day, Julie Christie's my dad's favorite actress of all time. And I think this might be one of his favorite movies. And I was like, oh, I get it now. I see why he loves this movie.
Yes, you got to see a lot of Julie Christie breasts and Donald Sutherland ass. So if you are a fan of tits and or ass, Don't Look Now is the movie for you.
Yes, and curly 70s hair everywhere.
Yeah, curly 70s hair everywhere.
So sex scene aside, which maybe will come up later in the conversation in some more like thoughtful and analytical way. I don't know. Well, I mean, I think this is an incredible film from a filmmaking standpoint. Like you said, very Hitchcockian, lots of like cool visual motifs and match cuts. So it's really like, it's really deep from a filmmaking standpoint and deep from a, emotional exploration of humanity standpoint. So yeah, I was blown away. It didn't disappoint. It did not scare me as much as it did when I was like 16, but I also did close my eyes during the end part to not be like re-traumatized also,
I
because I knew I had to stay at home alone that night.
Yeah, I did. We were watching this film in the afternoon per your request. And I did look over towards the climax of the film and saw that you had your hands covering your eyes. And I was like, oh, snap. Sonja's going through it right now.
Well, it's just a precaution.
Yeah.
I just remember, like, after I saw this, we had like a German Shepherd, and when I was in high school, named Heidi. She was wonderful, and I never closed the door of my bedroom all the way because we had to be able to let the cats and dogs like freely roam through the house. That was like an understood rule. So I was sleeping, and in the night, Heidi came up like into my room and like put her face in my face, like on my bed. Like she was like, the height of the bed. And I woke up and like screamed because I thought it was the like little person from the end of the movie. The murderer was like eye to eye with me on my bed.
She does have dog-like features.
Less hairy, but
Yeah.
yes. So seriously, like, yeah, it scared me. But I do think that if I went back to like Venice, which I do hope we go to Venice at some point.
I'm not going to Venice after watching this movie. You kidding me? Bad things happen there.
Oh, well, that was 50 years ago. It's fine now.
I guess that's true.
But I would love to, because I have been to Venice, Italy, but I'd like to go back because I don't know if I've been since I've seen this. And yeah, it just seems so creepy. And I've never been to Venice at night. I've never spent the night there. So I was like, oh, I want to go spend the night and see if it's as like eerie as this movie makes it seem.
Well, this film also takes place in the winter. And most films that take place in Venice, they always are like shot in the spring or the summer, and it's like bright blue skies and the water's all blue. And this one is intentionally shot in the winter where it looks frigid. Everybody, you could see everybody's breath walking around. You see everybody like bundled up. It just looks bleak and gray, and the city looks like it's deteriorating because, all these old hundreds and hundreds of year old buildings who are, getting splashed with salty water all the time. In the bright sunlight, it's like, ooh, look at that. That looks vintage. Look at the colors. But in the summer, when it's all gray and cloudy, it looks like shit. And
you mean in the winter?
In the winter when it's all gray and cloudy, it looks like shit. So excellent choice by Nicholas Roeg to set this in the winter time.
Yeah, for sure. It definitely is not sunny and cheerful. Plus, the winter lends itself to some really great costume choices, which was something I definitely noticed in this movie. Like the textures and the colors of the clothes were kind of dark. And, the couple's not very happy, obviously, because their daughter has passed away. But yeah, the clothing and the fabrics were like really fantastic in this movie.
And there's a nice touch for both of the lead characters' costumes. Their daughter, who passed away, when we see her drown, she's wearing this bright red raincoat, which comes into play at the end of the film. But throughout the film, you have Laura, Julie Christie's character, is always wearing these like shiny red rain boots that kind of like mimic the jacket of their daughter. And then throughout the entire film, John's wearing this red scarf, or this scarf that has like this bold hint of red on it. That's kind of shows like both parents trying to cling to, their daughter in any way they can. So those nice little touches. The film is loaded with all kinds of little touches and symbolism and all that kind of stuff that, like, I'm sure you have some thoughts, Sonja, but for me, being this is the first time I've seen it, like, the first thing I thought when the movie was done was like, my God, I got to watch it again, just because it is so dense and so loaded with so much visual storytelling and symbolism that I couldn't even, we're not going to be able to scratch the surface here in this discussion.
Right. Yeah, for sure. Well, that was part of why I think I've been trying to get us to watch this for a long time. Like, it'll periodically be at the New Bev or at some theater. And I'm always like, we should go. And then for one reason or another, we can't. And I think it's because I was like, this time I'm gonna crack it. I'm gonna understand all the symbols in this movie, because I like remembered how dense it was, and it's really a testament to how really excellent the film is that, 25 years later, or however long it's been since I've seen it, that like I remembered so many details, even before rewatching it. Like, it just stays with you because it's just so well made.
Yeah.
And even though I don't think I understand the movie fully, which we'll talk about in a second, like it makes sense in like a guttural, visceral way that stays with you, even if you don't like intellectually comprehend every detail.
Yeah, you don't necessarily need to understand all of the symbolism, of which there's like symbolism aplenty with like religion and all this kind of stuff. But at the heart of it, it is a story about these two grieving parents. One of them dealing with it one way, another one dealing with it a very another way, and the horrors that come with just trauma and like losing somebody you love. And it is not a traditional horror sense in the fact that there's no like, quote unquote monster. You're not like running from Freddy Krueger or something like that. There's no ghosts coming at you, but the horrors of grief and life and how we internalize it and deal with it, that can be incredibly scary also. And they pull that off well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, probably scarier in a way, since Freddy's not real, I hope. But yeah, I mean, I think the first, like, so as I was watching it, I'm like getting in like film school mode and like writing down all this stuff. And then of course, like as the third act of the film is going, I'm like not writing down anything. So I'm just like completely absorbed in what's happening. But I think like there's a few motifs that are worth acknowledging, if not totally understanding. And like water is definitely a primary one. I mean, their daughter Christine drowns in a pond, and Venice is, famously the city that's built on the water. The way you get around, there's like I don't even think there's cars in Venice. Like, I think you get around on boats. Like, that's the streets, or you walk. And then there's all of these like imagery in the canals. Like, they are walking down the street, and then all of a sudden the street just like dead ends into this little tiny staircase that goes into the canal, which is like absolutely horrifying, especially considering one of the characters in the movie is like blind. And I was like, God, that seems very dangerous.
Or could you imagine that today with everybody on their, all these zombies on their cell phones, and you're just like scrolling Tinder or whatever, and then you're in the canal.
Yeah.
Serves you right.
They're like, turn right here.
Yeah, exactly.
There's a part where you see like rats swimming in the canal. There's a part where they pull a woman who'd been drowned out of the canal, which is a really kind of disturbing image. There's like a part where Donald Sutherland's character finds like this little baby doll that's like floating face down in the canal, which is, obviously very related to their daughter and how she died. So there's like all of that. And then there's even like a scene where Julie Christie faints while they're having lunch. and like all the liquids from the wine and the salad dressing and different things are like all just dripping on her while she's unconscious on the floor.
That
there's
scene
also
made me really like, it wasn't like necessarily a scary scene, but like that scene where she faints after meeting the blind psychic for the first time and her sister, that whole sequence just like really set the tone for like, good God, I am uncomfortable.
You're so sad and there's no need to be.
My sister's psychic.
She wants you to know. I've seen her. And she wants you to know that she's happy. I've seen your little girl sitting between you and your husband, and she was laughing. Yes. Oh, yes, she's with you. She's with you, my dear. And she's laughing.
I'm sorry if we're dead.
She's wearing a shiny little mac. Oh, but she's laughing, she's happy as can be.
I am uncomfortable with this whole situation.
Oh yeah, it's like, it's super creepy. And I think the women, the psychic and her sister, like, are actually have good intentions.
Yeah.
But I think classically you meet these like spinster old lady sisters, and one of them's like blind, and they're like telling this young woman like information that's like upsetting her.
Yeah.
And you're kind of like, oh, this is bad. This is going to be really bad. But ends up not really being so bad for her, maybe for other characters in the movie. Yeah. So there's all this like liquid and water stuff happening, which like then made me be like, oh, it's also like very religious because he's there to restore a cathedral. And when the daughter drowns, he's looking at a slide of a cathedral. And, Italy is such a religious country, or known for being such a religious country. And there's like this bishop who's like a central character, or I guess I should say like a peripheral character. So I was like, is there like a baptism theme? I don't have an answer to that, but these were thoughts that I was having.
Yeah. Well, like I think I told you, and I'm not going to get into the details of it because I am not a expert on Catholicism, but I read a lot of theories. I know, shocking to everybody listening. I read some theories that like there's a lot of like Adam and Eve symbolism in this, and I read why, and I was like, oh man, look at this, Adam and Eve. I'm gonna be so smart on the podcast, but then I forgot it all because I'm not like super privy on the religious stuff. The only thing I know really about Catholicism is that if you start putting Catholicism in your movie, it's gonna get creepy. That's just have you ever seen a movie about Catholicism that is not like weird and creepy? The Catholics are just fucking creepy, man. Like, I mean, even the ones that are made by Catholics that are for Catholics, like Passion of the Christ, creepy as shit. That movie, it's like, why the creepy?
Yeah, I guess that's true. I mean, maybe it's because it's so ancient and it's so like, the main character in Catholicism was like crucified and stuff. So, you drink blood, eat body, things like that. Clearly, I'm also an expert on Catholicism here. But yeah, it certainly lends itself to all kinds of intense imagery and messages.
Sorry, and I apologize to our Catholic listeners. You're all right. I don't care what they say.
Yeah, sorry, Lynch family.
Yes, and Ybarra family.
Yeah, so the other symbol that I noticed a lot, and this kind of this will bring me to like one of the craziest scenes I think in the whole movie, is like eyes and looking and windows and mirrors are like really big. Like the first shot of the movie is actually like a reflection of the pond where the daughter ends up drowning, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
But, obviously there's like a blind character. they call being psychic second sight.
So second sight. I said third sight earlier, but you're right. Second sight. My bad.
Yeah, I don't know if that's third sight. What's your second sight?
Well, I was thinking third eye open. I think that was what where my brain went. But you're right. Second sight. Okay.
Second. Either way. But yeah, it's like another form of sight.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Looking at slides, looking in mirrors. There's a lot of really great scenes that take place in like the bathroom of their hotel, which has a big mirror in it. But also there's like a scene where John is in the cathedral that he's restoring, and he's trying to like see if this new piece of a mosaic is going to fit in with like the old mosaic that they're trying to restore. And he's like trying to find where it'll match. And he goes like near the eye of this person that's in the mosaic. And then all of a sudden this like janky ass horrifying scaffolding that he's on that was already like freaking me out.
Yeah.
Like breaks.
Right.
And he just is like he's going to like free fall into the ground and die, like, you know, fall several feet from like the roof of this cathedral. But he grabs a rope and it's very stressful. And I thought that was like a really intense scene.
Yeah,
I think I was like yelling at the TV. I was like, why don't you grab him?
Yeah. It was intense. It was intense. And then other shit's falling from everybody's getting pieces of plywood are falling on other workers as they're trying to save them. It's a gripping scene.
Yeah.
Very gripping.
The asbestos is just out of control. Yeah. I thought that was like, and it's funny because that's like probably the most like action packed scene in the movie. When I saw that scene, I said, you know what they need on this job? Some Mexicans. This would never happen. Yeah. The Italian people, they don't build like they used to.
No. But yeah, the vision, the sight, the mirrors, the reflections, all, again, I'm not quite sure what it all means, but it's fun to look at. And yeah, there's a lot of scenes of Julie Christie with like, we're looking at her through like 3 different mirrors and you see her from like 3 different angles at the same time. You're just like, man, she looks great from every single angle.
Like, damn you, Julie Christie.
But I mean, and of course the film is called Don't Look Now. So, so the sight and reflection motif is definitely strong.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I honestly like, want to just watch it again. Maybe I'll even keep my eyes open for the end. I don't know. Probably not. But it's like, I think that there's so much meaning and there's so much happening in this movie, and it's not essential to understand it because you do understand it just by watching it. Like your body, your like deeper sense, your second sight. Your second sight understands.
And as the writer of the original short story said, I'll say the quote again: "The film added more depth and unconscious thoughts that might have been my own." So on an unconscious or subconscious level, you get it. Even if you don't understand every one of these like masterful shots, your guts are telling you what's happening and what you're supposed to be feeling. And it all works.
Yeah, absolutely. By the way, the author of the novel also wrote the novel Rebecca that the Hitchcock movie is based on.
No shit. Wow, that's cool.
Yeah.
Wow, so Daphne du Maurier. We're going to have to check you out.
Yeah, it sounds like she writes some dark books.
Yeah. Well, yeah, like we could dive into this movie for ages probably, but it must be seen to be believed. And once you see it, nothing is as it seems. Don't Look Now from 1973, starring the late, great Donald Sutherland. An incredible film. I think he won or was nominated for a BAFTA for this. And it is available at your local video stores. I highly recommend checking it out. As Sonja mentioned, it pops up in repertory screenings frequently. So if you ever see it pop up, check it out on the big screen. Now that I've seen it once, I definitely want to check it out on the big screen. And if you want to be demanding, you can rent it on demand. All right, the second film that we are going to be discussing is, we're going back in time a little bit. We're going backwards 3 years. This is perhaps the film that Donald Sutherland is most famous for, or at least was most famous for. And that film is MASH, directed by Robert Altman, written by Ring Lardner, based on Richard Hooker's 1968 novel. All the films we're discussing today based on previous written work, other source material. That's just something I just picked up on as in the moment right now.
Yeah, I noticed that too, actually.
So MASH is an acronym for Mobile Army Surgical Hospital, and it follows 3 doctors, a mere 3 miles. This is the Gimme Three podcast. 3 doctors, 3 miles from the front lines of the Korean War. We got Hawkeye Pierce, who's played by Donald Sutherland. We got Duke Forrest, who's played by Tom Skerritt. And we got Trapper John, played by Elliot Gould. And these doctors are wild and crazy guys. They are getting into hijinks, and they play some pranks, and they love women or hate women, depending on how you want to look at it. And they have got issues with rules and authority figures, especially their female superior, who they coin Hot Lips. The film unfolds kind of like an anthology film of sorts. It's very episodic, which, as you pointed out to me, babe, that this is, it's no wonder that this kind of sparked one of the most successful sitcoms ever produced. In fact, there's actual numbers to show that this was the most successful sitcom ever produced. The film won the Palme d'Or at the 1970 Cannes Film Festival and was nominated for 5 Academy Awards and took home the Best Adapted Screenplay Oscar. Sonja Mereu, your thoughts on MASH? MASH. Can I say something real quick, actually? I got some fun stories about growing up with the show, but when I was a kid, I did not realize that MASH was an acronym. So I just thought they capitalized all the letters just for like effect. So I used to call the show MASH. Anytime the show would be on, I'd be like, let's watch MASH.
Well, I've never seen this show, which is insane. I realize, being that it's the like longest running show or whatever. Although my childhood association with MASH was this game that we would play called Mansion, Apartment, Shack, House. And it was like all the girls, we would have like all these lists of like different like things like that, or like different categories of things in your like future life. And then, you know, you would pick like a number, and like you would go through and like cross out things until you ended up with like one thing per category. And you'd end up being like, oh, well, you're going to live in a shack.
Oh, God.
And your job is going to be like a social worker.
Oh, my.
And you're, you know, going to be married to Bud Bundy. You know, it would always be like boys that you went to school with. But yeah, so that's what I always thought of as MASH as a kid.
That sounds like more fun.
It's a fun game. We can play it sometime. We'll see what your future life holds.
Yeah.
So yeah, the movie I had wanted to see for a long time because I'm like, I love Robert Altman, love Shortcuts, Nashville, Ready to Wear, Three Women, like so many of his movies. But I'd never seen MASH, which is, you know, kind of like the most famous, considered one of the greatest of all time. So I had really, really high expectations. And I have to say, as a film, it did not live up to my expectations. But I of course think Donald Sutherland was, you know, like fantastic in it. I mean, I think the whole cast, and that's one of Altman's biggest strengths, is like he can just pull together these insane ensemble casts and give like any character can become like the star for a moment or a scene with these like great casts that he has. And I think there's like, you know, the theme song is incredible. As you said, like, it's the same as the one from the show, I guess. I've never seen the show.
Yeah, so if you've watched the show and you know the theme song, which I'm sure a lot of people have, do 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 do. I'll stop there so we don't get sued. But in the film, the movie opens with the lyrics, and it's kind of similar to the opening credit crawl of the show. Only this one's got lyrics on this one, and the lyrics of the song is called "Suicide is Painless" by Johnny Mandel, and you're just like, whoa, okay, we got some lyrics to this tune, huh? And the lyrics set you up for something kind of heavy that the film doesn't really deliver. But continue, Sonja.
Yeah, well, I thought the opening scene was like incredible. I was like, I am all in on this movie. I have had the song stuck in my head all week. It's a great song. Another thing Altman does really well is songs in his films.
Yeah.
But I would actually say that Suicide is Painless might actually describe the like vibe of the film more than you would think, because it's like they're in this crazy, horrible place. They're at war, which I know is Korea, but as Altman has said, it was shot during Vietnam and released during Vietnam. And in his mind, it was always Vietnam, but the studio but the book was based in Korea, and the studio was like, this is absolutely not a Vietnam movie. We don't want to touch that. So they have, they make a point to tell you it's Korea, but
it's
in
Vietnam.
Altman's mind and in the actors' minds, I'm sure it's Vietnam, although it's really shot in Southern California. Neither here nor there. But yeah, it's like this very horrible situation. They're like near the front line of the war. They're like literally trying to save lives with like Tampax and dental floss. Like this is not a proper hospital. The main characters at least are drafted, so it's not like they want to be there. So they're trying to do everything they can to make this like horrible experience as painless as possible for them. And in some ways, I don't agree with how they act, because I do think they're very like sexist and borderline like misogynist behavior. And like there's other things I don't love about them. But I do kind of understand like that this is like about coping mechanisms for like a horrific situation.
Totally. Yeah. 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 I agree. And the film, like at the time, we talked about this because you've had to hear me. I agree with you. I had high expectations, and for me, the expectations were not met. I think I was perhaps even lower on this film than you were, but there were things that I appreciated about it. And at the time that this came out, 1970, it was very, very boundary pushing. The filmmaking approach especially was like very fresh. The like laid back conversational approach was very fresh. The overlapping dialogue of having like actors talk over each other was like pretty radical at the time. Altman's like always placing his camera, seemingly like 100 yards away, and then he'll like crash zoom into, a 2-shot or something, which is like, a unique way to shoot a scene. There are a lot of sound issues in the film, and I think that might be part of the reason why, is because like if you're starting with a super wide and then crash zooming into a close-up, there's no real place for you to put the boom. So that might explain some of the sound issues. And then the structure, as we talked about a little bit, was very fresh and surprising. In a sense, the film is kind of like anarchist rule breaking, and much like the characters in the film are. And I can appreciate and respect all of those accolades and touchstones, but as you know, because you've had to hear me bitch about it for the last 3 days, the film was not for me. In my opinion, doesn't quite hold up, and not for the reasons you'd think, not for like the misogyny or the racist jokes, of which there is like a lot. And, if you're going to be triggered by that stuff, I'd just say probably avoid the film, just because it's like constant, the misogynist and sexist jokes. But I think there are films of that era that wouldn't get made today that still hold up, like Blazing Saddles or something like that. But yeah, like you said, it is Donald Sutherland, I think, and Elliot Gould are as harsh a characters as they were. The performances were awesome, oozing with charisma, oozing with swagger. Despite winning Best Adapted Screenplay, I thought there was some clunky dialogue on the page, but Sutherland and Gould just make everything feel so freaking natural. And they're bastards, but you're just like, God damn, those guys are kind of cool. Those guys are kind of cool. And Sonja, you have some 60-year-old tea to dish out too, don't you, about Donald Sutherland and Elliot Gould?
I do. I mean, I think it's been dished because I read it on the internet, but yeah, I mean, they both had iconic performances, for sure. I think even though Alan Alda played Hawkeye on the TV show, I think that Donald Sutherland is just as inextricably linked to that character, and he only played him for 2 hours.
Right.
And Elliot Gould is just always the best.
Yeah.
Even when he's on Friends, you're just I love this guy. But yeah, supposedly, both Elliot Gould and Donald Sutherland spent a good chunk of the filmmaking trying to get Robert Altman fired. Unclear on exactly why, but I do know that Robert Altman, especially in his earlier career, wasn't known to be the easiest person to work with. Probably something related to that. And maybe something to do with the kind of unconventional aspects of the film, how it was filmed and stuff like that.
How it's filmed, or people talking over each other, if you're being like, oh, well, he's going to talk over my lines. Well, that's my goddamn line,
Yeah.
You know how actors are. Well, I'm going after everybody today. What is up with that? Sorry, actors. I love you guys.
You feel too comfortable around me, obviously. Apparently, Donald Sutherland and Altman never made peace on this fact, and thus never worked together again. But supposedly Elliot Gould did write a letter of apology, maybe after MASH became the smashing success that it was, and he was oh, I don't know what his motivation was, but they collaborated again several times, including on The Long Goodbye, which is another amazing Altman movie.
Great movie, yeah.
An amazing Elliot Gould movie. Yeah, but I think Altman had the last laugh there because I think this movie was a massive hit. I think it cost $3 million to make and made 80 something million domestically, and obviously won the Palme d'Or, won Best Adapted Screenplay, became a TV show, which, I'm sure made someone money, maybe not Robert Altman, but yeah, so it clearly, and it's considered one of the greatest films of all time. We have 100 essential films poster on our wall, and MASH is one of them.
Yeah.
So whatever, we personally think as viewers, clearly it is an adored film.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, I think it's on AFI's top 100, I'm sure. And yeah, I'm sure Altman did get a piece of that MASH sitcom money. So did you know that MASH, the finale of that show, is the most watched episode of television ever?
More than the finale of Lost? Just kidding.
Believe it or not, more than the finale of Lost. And I think to this day that record holds. And considering that people are watching less and less TV, that record will probably never be broken. So that is that just says something about how the longevity of this enterprise MASH was, because it was that show was a banger of a hit. And the thing I wanted to mention about the show, the fun story I had, which we were at dinner with my mom and my aunt the other day, talking about my first memory ever that I can remember is waking up in the middle of the night or late at night, waking up in my room with my mom sleeping and the TV on and MASH being on the television and that theme song and the end credits going. That's like the first memory that I have of my life is MASH.
Wow. That is significant.
MASH.
Maybe that's why you went into the film industry.
Who knows? I should have been a doctor.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I don't know if this movie makes a good argument for being a doctor.
It certainly doesn't.
But I have to say, before we move on to the next movie, that there's a few scenes that I did really think were just great. Again, like I think that this was a movie that was of its time. And if I was of that time, I think I would love this movie the way that audiences clearly loved it.
Yeah.
I think, we're desensitized by certain things, like the violence of the surgery scenes.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Like it just doesn't hit the same way when you've seen all of the insane violence that we've seen in movies.
Or characters talking over each other. It's like, oh, you're just like, okay, well, it's just a normal scene. We're used to that. But that was like cutting edge shit when that came out.
Exactly. You're like rude.
Yeah.
Why are you interrupting each other? Yeah. I mean, like all of the things that made it cutting edge. I mean, even like the satire of something that was like happening at that time.
Right.
I just think that we're like we're coming at it from like a different audience perspective these days. But a couple of scenes that I really thought were memorable and great were, there's a scene where Hot Lips O'Houlihan and Robert Duvall's character are having sex in the tent, and they send one of the guys who's actually played by Bud Cort, who's Harold from Harold and Maude. They send him in to like plant a microphone under the bed while they're having sex, and then they play the sounds to like the entire army camp over the loudspeaker.
Right.
And like that's just good hijinks.
It's just good. Wild and crazy guy.
I also like thought it was funny because like they don't really play it like you don't feel like you're supposed to laugh. Like it's funny, but like you don't laugh. I don't know. I thought that was like interesting, like how Robert Altman did these scenes that were quite like zany, but they weren't like slapsticky the way that other comedies are. There's also this whole like football sequence at the end, which is like pretty absurd and just kind of frivolous and like a silly way to end the movie. But I enjoyed it, especially because Fred Williamson is in it.
Yeah.
And I love him.
Yeah, he's great.
So that was fun to see him. And also just to think like, yeah, we're in the midst of war, but like the head people of these like battalions or whatever they're called in the army just want to like play football and gamble on it.
Right.
Like that really does not feel far off.
No.
Like even if that's not like literally what's happening, like it feels very like real.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, I agree. There are, like I said, it's kind of an anthology piece, and some of the little pieces, some of the little episodes are great and get you cracking up and laughing. And then, some just didn't work for me, but maybe they'll work for you. You can check it out for yourself and see. And like I said, I especially am in the minority because it is considered one of the all-time greats. So don't listen to old Nick. Listen to yourself. Listen to your heart. MASH. It's available on demand. I think you can rent it on wherever you rent your movies, and that includes renting them at your local video store. If you live in LA, Vidiots, recommend it. Cinephile Video, recommend it. Videotech, recommend it. Check it out. Which brings us to our last film of the day, celebrating the life of old Mr. Donald Sutherland. A film I had not seen. I hadn't seen any of these movies. How often does that happen on the Gimme Three podcast? I hadn't seen a single one of these. 6 Degrees of Separation from 1993, directed by Fred Schapisi. I'm not sure if that's how you pronounce his name, but I hope it is because it sounds cool.
I don't think that's his name.
Fred Scapisky.
I thought it was Scapisi.
Fred Scapisky.
Either way.
Directed by Fred. Written by John Guar from the famous band Guar.
That is how you pronounce his name.
Okay, there you go. Written by John Guar, based on his Pulitzer Prize nominated play. And the cast is as stacked as a Fifth Avenue apartment complex. You got Donald Sutherland. You got Stockard Channing. You got Will Smith. You got Ian McKellen, Anthony Michael Hall, Heather Graham. And that's just scratching the surface, really. And we've got another movie that toys with structure and subverting expectations. This film, 6 Degrees of Separation, follows these Fifth Avenue elite socialites. Louisa, short for Louisa, is played by Stockard Channing, and Flan is played by Donald Sutherland. Flan is an art dealer, and he is dealing mainly in high-end pieces that are going for millions. So, needless to say, they are rich. And one day, this young, well-mannered, well-dressed young man comes in, knocks on their door, and he says, I know your kid's at Harvard, and he's looking for help. He's been stabbed. And indeed, he has been stabbed. So this young man, Paul, who's played by a very young Will Smith, he's charming. He's a charming motherfucker, let me tell you. He knows exactly how to swoon these rich folk. And they are drooling all over him. And even more so, they're drooling all over him when he drops that he is the son of Sidney Poitier. Now, listen, everybody loves Sidney Poitier. Everybody loves Sidney Poitier. But you know who especially loves Sidney Poitier? White people. White people love Sidney Poitier because they're like, hey, there's a black man that I can get down with.
I feel comfortable about that man.
Yes, exactly. So brilliant play by Paul. And it's just all going to make for great conversation, right? These socialites can be like, oh, my kids know the son of Sidney Poitier and they're going to Harvard together. So anywho, Paul is just wowing them with his mind and his existential analysis of man and imagination. He's just wowing them left and right. He's wowing them so much that they offer for him to stay at their place this one night. Because the next day he's going to go visit his pop. His pop's coming to New York City.
He's going to go start working on making the film Cats.
Yes. They're going to... Sidney Poitier is going to be directing the film adaptation of Cats. That's why he's coming to New York City. And these socialites are like, fascinating. Man, what a setup.
And then we asked him what his thesis was on.
The one that was stabbed.
Well, a substitute teacher out on Long Island was dropped from his job for fighting with a student. A few weeks later, he returned to the classroom, shot the student, unsuccessfully, held the class hostage, and then shot himself, successfully. This fact caught my eye. Last sentence, Times. A neighbor described the teacher as a nice boy, always reading Catcher in the Rye. This nitwit Chapman, who shot John Lennon, said he did it because he wanted to draw the attention of the world to Catcher in the Rye. And the reading of this book would be his defense. Young Hinckley, the whiz kid who shot Reagan and his press secretary, said, if you want my defense, all you have to do is read Catcher in the Rye.
I haven't read it in years.
Well, I borrowed a copy from a young friend of mine because I wanted to see what she had underlined. And I read this book to find out why this touching, beautiful, sensitive story published in July 1951 had turned into this manifesto of hate. I started reading. It's exactly as I had remembered. Everybody's a phony. Page 2, my brother's in Hollywood being a prostitute. Page 3, what a phony slob his father was. Page 9, people never notice anything. Then on page 22, my hair stood up. Well, remember Holden Caulfield, the definitive, sensitive youth wearing his red hunter's cap? A deer hunter's cap? Like hell it is. I sort of closed one eye like I was taking aim at it. This is a people shooting hat. I shoot people in this hat.
He stays at the house, and early in the morning when Lisa's going to wake him up to go meet his father, she finds Paul getting freaky with another man in the guest room, and they're shocked, and it's a buzzkill, and end of story. But they start going to all these events, a wedding here, art show here. They're telling the story of their encounter with Sidney Poitier's wild and gay son to all their friends. As they're telling the story to all their friends, they discover that Paul's been making the rounds in this Fifth Avenue socialite scene. He ain't the only home that he's made a stop to. Or they're not the only home he's made a stop to. So he's charmed his way through multiple homes. He never steals. He never hurts them. He just charms them and mind fucks them into submission, runs his game on them, and from time to time gets his nut in the process. 6 Degrees of Separation. Sonja, what did you think of 6 Degrees of Separation?
I loved it. I think that this is an incredible movie.
Yeah.
I had seen it in 1993, I guess. I saw it when it came out because I was a fan of Will Smith and the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air.
Mm-hmm.
I clearly did not understand this movie. Rewatching it now, I was like, how did I even begin to comprehend this film? But it goes to show Will Smith's star power.
Yeah.
That, 10-year-olds were like, I have to see 6 Degrees of Separation. Did it probably help that I was from New York? So I did have a leg up on some of the background knowledge. So yeah, rewatching it now, I was just blown away by the complexity of the emotions and the story and why Paul would go through everything that he's going through to be part of this world. If it isn't for financial gain, he doesn't want money. He doesn't want to become an art dealer. He doesn't have any specific goal. He just wants to, I guess, to be part of it, to be accepted. So yeah, I thought it was a great movie. And I mean, the 3 central performances are just incredible.
Mm-hmm.
I think I texted you when I was watching it and I was like, young Will Smith is glorious.
Yeah.
It was just so wonderful to watch him at that point in his career and so open and taking on a role that I don't think he's done anything similar.
No, it felt like a real risk, and yeah, it wasn't.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a big Will Smith fan, and recently, the last 20 years or so, it's mostly Will Smith movies. Where it's Will Smith as Will Smith. So it was fun to see him kind of do something that he was able to stretch his acting chops, which I'm sure he was excited to do, being in the midst of, doing a weekly sitcom. My favorite sitcom of all time, by the way, Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. So yeah, it was really fun to watch him in this role, just because he is great in it, but he also gets to do a little performance within a performance. And that's, I love
Mm-hmm.
a performance within a performance. I think it's great. And he did a good job of doing it.
Yeah, no, I mean, this was a huge career turning point for him. And he did some other very stellar, less Will Smithy roles.
He's great in Ali. Yeah.
I think he might have been nominated for an Oscar for this movie.
I don't think he was for this movie. He might have been nominated for something, but I think the only Academy Award nomination for this film was Stockard Channing was nominated for Best Supporting Actress.
Yeah. I mean, and well deserved. I think she
Yeah.
might have also played the same character in the play.
Oh, cool.
Originally.
Cool.
Don't quote me on that. Yeah, and then something I noticed, because this was like the 4th Donald Sutherland movie I watched this week. I watched Buffy just, because why not? I think one of his biggest strengths is that he is not a scenery chewer.
Yeah.
He probably could be if he wanted to be, but like I think that he can be like the low key grounding element for other actors to go big.
Right.
Because like his performance is great, but he's like so understated compared to like Stockard Channing,
Right.
or even Will Smith. I mean, Will Smith is like trying to act understated because he's trying to act proper, but he's also like stealing every scene and like acting his ass off.
Yeah,
in a very like forward way.
He's Mr. Charisma in this movie.
Yeah. So I think that that's probably like what, Kiefer Sutherland is talking about, like that Donald approached, every role with like a respect, no matter what it was, because he wasn't always going to be like the guy that was like getting all the attention.
Absolutely. Yeah. And yeah, as you talked about Buffy, he definitely does that in Buffy, which is essentially a schlocky B film. It's a B movie in a very intentional way.
Bite your tongue.
No, it's I mean, they're going for camp in that movie. It's a campy, silly, goofy movie, and it's intended to be. You mentioned it also is like he takes it seriously, he grounds it, and in doing so he elevates the film. And that's what some of my favorite actors of all time do. I've mentioned it on this podcast before, but like I cling to the Pam Griers, I cling to the Robert Forsters, I cling to the Michael Parkses of the world's, Donald Sutherland, because yes, they are incredible actors and they can deliver incredible performances, but they also can be in bad movies and make those bad movies kind of good, or at least they are good in them. And you're just like, my God, that is the mark of an actor. He turned that line into a good line. My God. This film is filled with great lines. It's one of the I'm excited to actually try and find the screenplay of this and read it, because this is a really incredibly written film.
Incredibly. I think the first part of the movie that you talked about like at length at the beginning, which is like kind of the setup of like his whole first night with the Kittredges, is so incredible that in my memory from 30 years ago, no, God, really? 30 years ago when I saw this movie, was that was the whole movie.
Right.
I forgot. Not to say that the rest of the movie is not well written, because it really is. Like, it's fantastic, and it becomes like a different movie. It becomes kind of like a suspenseful, like not a whodunit, but like it changes tone after that first like section.
Yeah.
But the first section is so well written that I thought that was the whole movie. And I was like, cool with that. I was like, I'm going to totally spend 2 hours in this apartment with these people, like talking as he unravels this, this lie on them. And I was like completely into it. Absolutely.
Yeah. I really loved this movie. I never knew where it was going, as you say. Like, there's definitely a mystery element to it, but what I enjoyed about it so much, and I can compare it to a more recent movie that I did not like so much, but what I loved about this film so much is that there were as many emotional surprises and emotional twists as there were plot twists. Like when you start to understand what's going inside Wisa's heart and her yearning for like connection and humanity, and you start to feel for this, rich socialite, and you start to empathize with her a little bit more. When you see that Paul isn't above targeting poor people even. And you're just like, what is this guy's game? He's not a one-trick pony who's just, conning the rich. That was interesting to me. And then there is this emotional wallop of a dinner scene at the end of the film where Donald Sutherland and Stockard Channing just deliver the goods, man. Spoiler alert, spoiler alert. So at the end of the film, here's a big spoiler. Paul has gone to jail. Playtime's over. And Lisa is kind of shook because she's kind of still enamored with him. And she wants to connect to him because he was just so goddamn convincing and so charming. She says at this dinner table full of rich people, as they're still telling the story of how this has all gone down, she explains, hey, this prisoner, I just read that this prisoner just killed himself. And I wonder if it's him. And she's shook by it, clearly. She's not in a good place. And Fran, Sutherland's character, chimes in and, oh man, you talk about a grounding performance. His delivery of this line almost made me cry because it is a masterclass in subtext. He says,
We haven't seen the last of him, believe me. He'll be back. He'll find a way. The imagination. Oh.
And he's all kind of trying to shake it off and laugh it off. But the delivery and the look on his face is so clear that he wants him to come back, He wants he wants this kid to be okay, I was like, my God, what a performance. And then following that, Stockard Channing just delivers this incredible monologue, which I'm sure earned her the Oscar nomination. So that scene was just incredible. And it was a great button. Lots of layers in this movie and lots to love. Really was a surprise for me. And I'm excited to revisit it. And I'm just surprised I hadn't really heard of it. Being such a Will Smith fan, I had not heard of this film, but it is awesome.
Yeah, that is surprising, especially since 6 degrees of separation is such a known concept, and there's even 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon.
Well, I've heard of 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon. I've heard of that before.
But yeah, I mean, it goes to show if you're just a rich, shallow person and you raise kids to be like you, the way that Flan and Lisa did, then, you meet somebody who's seems like they have depth and you're like, oh, I love them more than I love my kids.
Right.
Right. No, I don't know about that exactly, but that's how it seemed, is that they had finally met somebody that felt real,
right.
Their kids are shallow, their friends are shallow, everything is a surface, performance of reality and of interaction. And, with Paul, they felt like they got something real from him.
Right.
Which is, the irony because he was lying.
Because he was totally full of shit. Yeah.
But there was a few just things that I had to I want to point out about this movie that I wrote down that I appreciated that are maybe not as deep as what you just discussed. But yeah, the fact that Sidney Poitier is making a live action version of Cats, I literally laughed out loud when they said that, making it so much funnier that film has actually been made.
Yep.
And we can think about that and compare it to what Sidney Poitier's version might have been.
Yep.
So
with Dame Judi Dench. Hey, isn't Ian McKellen in Cats also?
Oh my gosh, he is.
Oh my gosh. God.
Wow. Meta.
Well, and not in a good way.
No. On another meta way, I like that Will Smith's character Paul references Lord of the Rings in talking to Ian McKellen's character, because Ian McKellen later plays Gandalf in one of my favorite movie trilogies, which we'll never discuss on this unless you're not on it.
I'll be absent some weeks here and there. You guys can discuss the Lord of the Rings trilogy.
Sweet. I also loved that a pot of jam is like known to be the best gift to give rich people.
Right.
Like, great tidbit and like so true. Like, not that I've ever given anyone a pot of jam, but next time that I'm like stuck on what to give someone as a gift, it's not going to be a candle. It's going to be a pot of jam. So I might start making jam, Nick. Just warning you now. It's going to be crazy in the kitchen. I mean, I don't even like jam. I never use it.
You don't even like candles, but you make candles.
I know. I don't even like cake, and I made a cake yesterday. I like to make things to give them away.
Yeah.
So, jam is going to be the way I woo my future rich friends.
Right, yeah.
Another thing I just wanted to point out is that this movie would never work nowadays because of like social media, right? Like they can't like text their kids and be like, I met Paul, or like go on Facebook or
right.
Any of that, right? They try to like start being like, well, because they want to believe that Paul is maybe telling the truth. So they start like going to the library to like get books on Sidney Poitier to try to like find the name of his kid.
Right. Yeah, well, there's a more modern version of this story that I did not like as much, which is Saltburn. Is kind of which all that takes place in like the early 2000s. So also not fully in the modern social media world, but there are cell phones in that film. But where I thought that this movie succeeded and that movie failed was just the charm of the swooner, the charm of Paul versus, the Barry Keoghan character who was there, but I was just never like swooned by him, and like he never did anything in the script that made me be like, okay, I can see why these people would just bend over backwards for this young man. Whereas in this film, we were talking about it earlier, there were times towards the end of the movie where I still wanted to believe Paul, and I still wanted Paul to like be good at the end. I wanted for this to work out and be like, Paul's he should get his shot, like he should be in this world. And you don't get that with Saltburn, where pretty much every character in Saltburn is kind of like despicable and you want them all to suffer. This movie does the opposite, where it's in a despicable world, but you have empathy for each and every single one of the characters.
Right. Yeah. Completely.
Except for those kids, like the rich kids. You don't really have empathy for them.
They're kind of brats, for sure.
But did you notice the doctor?
They're funny, though.
Did you notice the doctor's son? Did you just recognize who that was?
Anthony Rapp? Or you're talking about, the angry one?
Yeah, the real angry doctor. That is J.J. Abrams.
Oh, that's so funny. I saw him on the cast list now that you mention it. I don't think I knew what he looked like.
Yeah.
He's pretty funny.
He's pretty funny then.
Yeah. He kind of was giving me like what's his name from The Sopranos? Meadows' boyfriend that gets killed.
Yeah.
He was giving me those vibes.
Totally.
Paulie?
Yeah.
No, Paulie's a different character. You know who I'm talking about. Yeah, no, with Saltburn, the character that charms you is the other guy, Jacob Elordi's character.
Right.
And like Barry Keoghan's like a sad dog that they, take in.
Right, exactly.
Who's just like very kind of conniving and manipulative. So yeah, totally different dynamic. Yeah, 6 Degrees of Separation is a much more powerful film because it's cooler when you like people that are bad.
Yeah.
Or not cool. It's more interesting. It challenges you to like think about yourself and why that would be. Absolutely.
Yeah, there's a lot of heady, emotional, existential thoughts and themes in this that are definitely worth discussing and dissecting. So I recommend that y'all check it out. 6 Degrees of Separation. It is streaming currently on Amazon Prime. Check it out. Let us know what you think. And you can do that by messaging us on Instagram at Gimme Three Podcast. That's GIMME spell out 3 podcast. Gimme Three Podcast on Instagram. You can also send us a text message. You can do that by scrolling down to the episode description. At the very top of our episode description, you're going to see a link that says, send us a text message. Click that link and you can send us a text message. Please let us know what you think of 6 Degrees of Separation. Let us know what you think of MASH, especially if you grew up in the era that MASH came out. I want to hear from you. What worked about MASH? If you remember seeing it for the first time, how did it shake you, move you, shake you? Want to hear from you. And then also let us know what you think of Don't Look Now. And if you haven't seen those movies, let us know your favorite Donald Sutherland movie. We want to know. Sonja, you are a wonderful, brilliant human being who is not on social media, and that's why I love you. But tell them, do you want to let people know your Letterboxd handle? You are on Letterboxd.
I am on Letterboxd. Yeah, ever since I left social media, when I'm sitting alone trying to kill time, I just go on Letterboxd and see what my friends watched recently. Or I just stare at the wall. Either works. Yes, my Letterboxd handle is Sonja M, or Sonjam, SONJAM.
Nice.
And my picture is of a cat.
Nice. You can follow me on Letterboxd at Nicholas Ybarra, on Instagram at Nicholas Ybarra, and on Twitter, also known as X, at Nicholas P. Ybarra. And the P stands for Potier. That's a wrap. What's that?
Are you another relative of his?
Well, hey, I never met my dad, so you never know.
Oh my God.
Boom. All right, everybody. That's a wrap on the Gimme Three podcast for today. We want to thank you all for listening to the show. Thank you, Sonja, for extending the Sonja's Movie Minute to Sonja's hour plus.
You're welcome.
Yes. Thank you all for listening to the Gimme Three podcast, and we will see you at the movies.